Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the National Press Club, the place where news happens. I'm Eileen O'Reilly, the Managing Editor of Standards and Training at Axios and the 116th President of the National Press Club. A quick housekeeping note, we have cards at your chairs for you to ask questions of our panelists here today. We will try to get to as many as we can in just a little bit. Just please keep your handwriting neat so I can read it. As you all know, today is World Press Freedom Day. Press freedom is something we address almost every single day here at the National Press Club and the National Press Club Journalism Institute. But it's heartwarming to hear a lot of other entities talking about press freedom, as the more we talk about this, the better, in my opinion. This week, we've been trying to really shine a spotlight on as many areas of the world where journalists are under threat, which are far way too many, unfortunately. We've had a screening of a documentary of what happened to a journalism outlet during the fall of Kabul, and one of those co-producers is here with us today. Yesterday, we had Action for Austin Tice Day. Just hours ago, we posted our interview with Rana Ayub, one of our newest members, on what's happening in India, despite being one of the world's largest democracies. We also just finished a letter writing campaign today for Evan Gershkovich, who has been unjustly detained in Russia for more than 5 weeks. We continue to fight for both Austin and Evan to come home. And I'm thrilled for the event we're having now, as we're very lucky to have 4 journalists here who can tell us their stories of how they were forced to flee their countries. They've offered to share their own personal stories of how they got out, got settled in a new location, and what the process is like in trying to cover what's happening in their countries. We are joined today by our very own Mohammad Mosaed. Mohammad fled Iran in 2021, and today he works here at the National Press Club. You're amazing, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next to Mohammad is Tamerat Negera. Tamerat fled Ethiopia and was able to return, but recently was held for 117 days without charges. Next to Tamerat is Zaki Daryabi. Daryabi.
Correct.
Zaki fled Afghanistan in 2021, and as mentioned earlier, we had the honor of screening his documentary about his experience during the Taliban invasion of Kabul in 2021. And next to Zaki is Diing Magot. Diing fled South Sudan earlier this year. Shortly after arriving in the United States, she became a National Press Club member. Inspired by her work she had done with the National Press Club in South Sudan, where she was a gender policy advisor. Thank you all for coming here today. I would like to give each of you a few moments to tell your stories in your own words. I guess we have the mics too.
Okay.
Do you want to start, Mohammed?
Sure. So, my journey with the Iran governments began in 2017. I was an investigative journalist in one of the most important newspaper in Iran, Sharq. As you know, working as a journalist in some sensitive topic like economic corruption is not easy in countries like Iran. I was doing that job for 2 years, and also I was using my Twitter account to share my stories about the situation in the country, and my primary focus was on economic corruption. But the milestone of my life was in 2019. In 2019, Iran faced a huge nationwide protest against the government, and the government responded to that in a brutal way. They shut it down the internet and started to kill the people. And then I just was trying to find a way to access to internet and tell the people outside the country what's happening in Iran. And I did it. I found a proxy and I wrote a tweet and uploaded an article about the situation in Iran on the internet. And then I lost my connection with the internet. Next morning, I woke up in my bed and I just saw a man with a mask and a handy camera in my room. And he was recording me. And then I turned my head and I saw another man with a gun. And they told me we have to go. They put me in a car and one of them put a gun in my head and told me, don't say anything. And then, long story short, I was in jail for some time. Then I released with bail, and then they arrested me again. And then they arrested my wife. After that, they started to warning me, if you want to keep your job, stay silent, or we will arrest your family too. But I resumed my job. Then they detained me to 5 years in prison, 2 years banning from journalism, and 2 years banning from have any kind of smartphones or using the internet. So I had no choice except to leave the country. And I left the country on my legs from the mountains to the Turkey in winter. And
Wow.
the,
How long did that take?
actually, I was alone. I lost my way in the mountains because there is no road in the mountains, and I was frozen in the border. And then I just was thinking about that. I have to find a place to die to when summer coming, some people can find my body for my family. And that was the reason I started to climbing in a hill in a top place in the mountain. And then suddenly I just saw I have one signal emergency antenna in my cell. The emergency, Turkish emergency, and they sent some troops, the border troops, and they saved me. And after that, I had a chance to give a Puerto visa from the US government, and I'm here after that. And I have to say thanks to National Press Club because this place was the place they give me a chance to work, because that was not easy in this country, even because when I arrived to the United States, I wait for 7 months to receive my first work permit from the US government, and thanks the National Press Club for that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Tam, how about you?
Okay. Well, my journey kind of, you can say, started in 2009 when I first fled the previous regime, TPLF led Prime Minister Meles Zenawi's regime here to US because we were, I was the editor-in-chief of the last editor-in-chief of a newspaper called Addis Negera, and it was started by 6 friends. The newspaper was successful, but when you're successful in journalism in terrible countries, you're not rewarded with, with at least continuing to work in your own country. So we're faced with the possibility of being charged minimum of 15 years on terrorism, and we decided it was not worth it. After we left, 2 of my colleagues, Mesfin Nagash, the managing editor, Abi Taklamaram, the founding editor-in-chief, were charged in absentia. And while I was in the States, trying to, rebuild my life, going to school, working, but missing home and being exiled was a very tough journey. So in those periods, I really thank social media for allowing me to kind of keep my life as a journalist, both as self, at the same time to be relevant in what was being discussed in Ethiopia. It kept me relevant, but it also kept me distracted, I guess, from my life here or my responsibilities. Because generations that, earlier generations, exiles, were not distracted as we were by what was going on back home. I remember in 2011 how I was very much engaged in the Egyptian revolution of Tahrir Square as if it was my story. So in 2015, in 2012, Meles Zenawi dies, and in 2015, a kind of reform starts happening within the ruling party, and the reform became very full-fledged in 2018 by the ascent of our current Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, to the position, and a really promising reform was born. In part, the reform agenda was, inviting exiled journalists, activists, and politicians, releasing imprisoned politicians, things of this nature, changing some laws, unblocking websites that were blocked by the government. And we were personally invited, directly or indirectly, and I just jumped into it. I took a one-way ticket to home. It was a fantastic thing to see my mother after 9 years, reconnect with my friends, reconnect with my girlfriend, previous girlfriend, and getting married, starting a new media company. It was fantastic. My focus, as my colleague was saying, his focus was on corruption. My focus was on literally reforming the ethnic federalism, because I believed, and many believed, that the ethnic federalism is the focus of our problem. A country as old as Ethiopia would have multiple problems. It's not going to be one problem, the economy, the demographics, our geography, our history, all this will have burdens. But I thought that at least if we start reforming the ethnic federalism and start de-ethnicizing our politics, our economy, and even our religions, it would at least be on the right direction. That was my focus. And it didn't sit well with the ruling elite, and mainly because as an ethnic Oromo, they were expecting me to fully support everything they do just because I'm an Oromo, and I don't buy that. And my 9 years of staying in the United States have even made me kind of detest ethnic politics even more. If you see a country as diverse as this build such a great country with all its past, the main thing is how it managed with all its challenges, its identity politics, be it coming from the left or be it coming from the right. America has done a great job of changing its own story and direction. I was hoping that for my country. And it didn't sit well. When he said, people invaded his house, started shooting him with handicap, it was a similar story for me, because one Friday on December 10th, 2021, just while I was in my room, they did that. They invaded our house. I was living with my in-laws because my mother-in-law was sick, and we moved in to assist her. My wife was literally a full-time nurse at that time, and also managing our media company. And over 15 federal police officers invaded our house. One of them took my picture using handicap. I asked him, could I at least even wash my face? They didn't care. They took me, and with a different and many more forces, I was returned home took all the possible electronics, phones, iPads, everything, and they went to the studio and office. The studio was built by, our supporters. I was able to raise over $25,000 from all over the world, from Ethiopians who were willing to donate for our media. And they took everything. Oh. They cleaned us out. But that was not the major thing. After they took me, they said to the family, you can come to the federal police station in Addis, and then you can visit him there. You can bring him his medicine, his food. But when I got there, they took me to a different place. And they took me to a military black site. Mm-hmm. They didn't tell my family where I was. For 7 days, the family did not know where I was. They don't know whether I was alive, I was dead, or even where I was. And that was very tough for my family.
Yeah, that would be terrible.
I didn't know how tough it was when I was in prison. Mm-hmm. When I came out, it was difficult. And after I was after the 7 day, I appeared at the court. Mm-hmm. And it was very much thanks to the.
Oh, it's okay.
It's the first time I'm speaking that way.
Oh.
Man, I'm weak.
Thank you for sharing your story. You don't
Go
have
ahead.
to say anything you don't want to. But
No, the thing is, being a journalist, being an activist,
mm-hmm.
you don't know what you put your family through.
Yeah. It's true.
Okay. And I appeared in court.
Thank you.
And after appearing to the court, I was transferred from a black site to a normal police station. Mm-hmm. It's then that I learned how much campaign was going on, how much people have spoken. I thought I was forgotten.
Never forgotten. Yes.
And I'm sorry.
No, please.
And in the police station, we started going to the courts again. The investigations continued. The interrogations continued. It was thank God I was not tortured, but I met a lot of people that were tortured. Mm. I was extremely lucky. People who were very strong, who had a lot of stories to tell, who had a lot of goodwill for this country, were threatened with days. Their families not knowing even where they were for 3 months, 6 months, even a year. So I'm actually the luckiest. And then the pressure continued on the government, including, a press release by a National Press Club. And then the government decided, they decided not to charge me, but they still kept me in prison. After repeated investigations, I think they didn't find anything. Mm-hmm. At least, again, I was very lucky because the court decided to release me on bail. And then another luck, God loves me a lot, because there are a lot of journalists currently that are released just like me on bail, but they were denied to leave the country. And after I was released on April 6, one of the challenge was, my wife and the rest of the team were able to run the media, borrowing items, buying new items again. But it was very difficult because I couldn't go back to media. It was obvious. They kept the possibility of being charged over my head.
Of course.
And then I couldn't, the next 7 months was like practically a house arrest. And we started contemplating what our next steps should be. And the possibility of exile came again, and there was no way, coming to the West, be it in Europe or Canada or US again. And we decided the best strategy was to use Thailand as a next step. We did not know what the third place would be, but at least just to be safe, we went to Thailand. And while we were in Thailand, I was applying for fellowships and doing anything, getting checked up again. CPJ, I have to thank them a lot. Free Press Unlimited, these organizations kind of facilitated my transportation and even some expenses for my medical checkups. And the Ethiopian community here, especially Global Alliance for Human Rights Organization, assisted us in our stay in Thailand. Okay. And then an invitation came from National Press Club. Assuming that National Press Club people assumed that I was already in the States, and you guys invited me to this event, and your invitation letter, here we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming and sharing. And for your wife as well. It's partnership for sure. Zaki, how about you?
Hello all. Thank you, National Press Club, for hosting this panel. Very sorry that your story, and also Mosaed Saib, your story. I think what you are facing in those countries, that freedom of expression is something very challenging to the power. I think most of us facing the same problem. So my story is not the same story, but it's close to this. I founded Etilaatroz newspaper in Kabul, the capital of Afghanistan, in 2012. Etilaatroz is a Persian name. It's close to Delhi Information. Since 2012, Etilaatroz just become famous with investigative reports and an investigative team, investigated political corruption, discrimination in Afghanistan, in order of political situation in Afghanistan. We just launched our website in English, kabulnow.com, in 2019. We printed Etilaatroz since 2021, and the last print version of Etilaatroz was on August 15, the fall of Kabul. I remember the headline was Ashraf Ghani's speech, and he was busy with how he can bring stability in Afghanistan, political stability. But hours later, we just realized that the Taliban entered to the Kabul. For us, we were thinking that political engagement with the Taliban that led by US government in Doha probably will provide a pathway that we can continue our work from Kabul. While we were thinking about continuing our work on the other side, we was thinking if the Taliban doesn't accept free press in Afghanistan, what will be the other option for Etilaatroz? So we were thinking how we can move part of Etilaatroz to regional countries, maybe Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, or Uzbekistan. Unfortunately, what happened with the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, there was no passport, there was no visa, there was no plan in the airport, so there was no way. We couldn't do that. Then there was only one option, that we should try to leave the country. I'm sure that many of you remember the photos that come from my colleague on 8 September. 5 of my colleagues have been detained by the Taliban while they were covering women protest in Kabul. Then 2 of them have been tortured for many hours. Nemat and Taqi, that photo just took the last year a very big prize in the US by Marcus Yam, and also James Heilberg for New York Times have photographed that incident. We have shown the documentary of that on May 1st here in this room. So after that, we were trying to talk with the Taliban if they can bring to justice the Taliban soldier who just detained our colleague and tortured. The answer that we received from the Taliban was something very unpredictable. And they asked me that you should come to our intelligence agency. We have to apologize you, and then we have some formal order for you, how Etilaatroz can be active since this in Afghanistan. So after 2 days after receiving call, I told them that I can't come to your office. If you want to come for apologize, then you should come to my office, and you should do from my colleagues that have been tortured by you. They told no, we do not come. Then I talked with the interim joint committee that have been established after fall of Kabul. Is really I should go there, and then they searched that this part of NDAs that asked me to come. It's not actually about for the media. It is a kind of prison for some person in the city. So I was worried that they are going to take me. After that, I was busy with how to send my staff outside of Afghanistan. Unfortunately, my decision was to leave the Kabul as a last person in Etilaatroz newsroom, but it did not happen due to logistic process, due to security situation that I have faced by myself. So on October 3rd, when we in Marcus Yam and Les Doucet from BBC were in the same plane at 3 p.m. from Kabul airport, Taliban just came to the office an hour later at 4 p.m. and just searched everywhere, the restrooms and everywhere, where is Zaki, and you should show me. And that was some signals that I have received for 2 weeks that it's not the place that you can continue your work. Then personally, I was believing that if I stay in Afghanistan, Etilaatroz presence in Kabul at that time was a big matter for USAID here, for many priests here. They were thinking, they were building our history that, look, Etilaatroz was an investigative reporter and they are still in Kabul. So Taliban will accept free priests in Afghanistan. We were thinking that the Etilaatroz presence is going to be a kind of legitimation for Taliban. So for the editorial team, we cannot agree on staying in Afghanistan. So I left Afghanistan on October 3rd. I was more than 40 days in Doha on CAS camp, a military camp. Then I came to Virginia and was there for more than 2 weeks in Fort Pitt camp with the help of some Afghan friends who just came here like 2017. I just came to Silver Spring in Maryland. And after a year after the fall of Kabul in August 2022, we started our newsroom, our office in Maryland in Silver Spring with a lot of Ethiopian community there, a lot of restaurants. Now, Etilaatroz is a kind of hybrid newsroom, a digital platform that publish Afghanistan's news in 3 languages, 2 national language, Persian and Pashto, and also in English. Our 7 colleagues are here in the US, 2 or 3 in Canada, 3 in Spain, two in Italy, one in UK, one in Pakistan, and dozens in Afghanistan. All the staff who are working from Afghanistan are working anonymously. They cannot announce their name because the Taliban is publicly announced that Etilaatroz is our enemy, and they are working as an intelligence agency, and they are working as spy for government, many government. They sometimes say that they are working with U.S. government, sometimes for Israel, sometimes for KGB, everything. This kind of fake news is every day spreading in the social media against us and against all independent journalists who are working and reporting on Afghanistan from exile. But we see that the Afghanistan situation in the media who are active in Afghanistan, they cannot report independently without Taliban censor and permission any news. So when you are reporting on the human rights situation in Afghanistan, when you are reporting what's happening inside the prisons of the Taliban, and when you reporting anything about security situation, this all brings the Taliban to think that we are their enemy. I think 2 days ago, one of the Taliban spokesperson wrote publicly in Twitter that our soldiers, our believers are around the world, include US, and we order them to kill every opponent by knife. And I think this is what really Taliban thinks about the free, independent media and journalists. So Etilaatroz is working in this environment. We need to be very, very careful of the staff who are working from Afghanistan. It's really hard. Every day when you are waking up here, you are worrying about what will come from Afghanistan. Everybody is good or not? So you are worried, and you are always feel a kind of pressure on you. Then I also still more than 20 months, I'm still busy with the education of my staff, and they are in Pakistan. My family are in Pakistan, part of them, and they are living in illegal situation in Pakistan because their visa expired on May 1. These are something that not just my personal story. All the Afghanistan journalists, I think, have the same story, the same situation. But also, the last thing that I can mention is these are some sad stories that we hear about Afghanistan journalism. The other side is some positive news that is happening. Today, Amu TV is launching in Virginia. They are going to satellite in publishing news for Afghanistan. To a permanent Afghan journalist just come and establish that. We have 2 other monthly newspaper magazine here, just established past 3 months. Many other media from Afghanistan just exiled to Europe. We have Rokhshana Media, we have Zan Times, and many others that are all trying to be active and keep the flow of information alive from Afghanistan. While Taliban is trying to close every international media from Kabul, as they banned Lindsay Beale from Washington Post that she cannot cover anymore in Afghanistan. She cannot stay in Afghanistan. They did with VOA, with Dichula, with BBC. They cannot publish anything content in Afghanistan. This is one of the big positive news. The other side is, I think, the participation of citizens. From every provinces, we daily receive a lot of news that they are reporting to us what's happening in their provinces. I think this is something that happened and we achieved in past 2 decades in Afghanistan. And I see that how the citizens are in a very tight and hard situation, trying to help Etilaatroz and also free and independent media in Afghanistan. Beyond a lot of limitations that is happening in Afghanistan, in actually the index that is coming from through international organizations are not very close to the truth because there's no data available. Today I was surprised by RSF index that freedom of expression in Afghanistan just come from 156 to 152. So we give some achievement, but it was not really true because there are a lot of journalists in prison. We know, but we cannot announce that. Many of them tortured for weeks and 2 weeks, and at least there are teens in prison that RSF don't know about that because they are afraid of their family. They are forcing to not tell something. Then we see a lot of violences every day is happening in Afghanistan against the journalists. When I come, there was an incident today in one of the provinces. I'm sure that that's happened, but we do not know that. Then also there are the numbers of journalists who are working anonymously, and I think they are not in the data. Nobody asked me that how many journalists you have, and it's not in database of Afghanistan journalists. So when you are making something new index, I think, and I believe that it's not very, very close to the truth in Afghanistan. This is the situation of Afghanistan journalism, independent media, and thank you.
Of course.
My name is Diing Magot. I'm a freelance journalist for Voice of America South Sudan in Focus. I also contribute to other media outlets such as InfoNile. Last year, I went to Egypt for a photo exhibition because of my story grant called The Drinking Trucks. I wanted to show the struggles of water challenge during COVID-19 and how people use water trucks to bring water to their houses. And then I'm also an International Visitor Leadership Program alumni. I came to America last year, 2022, for the International Visitor Leadership Program for journalists around the world. I was one of the journalists who was selected. I was selected in 2021. And it was for the Edward Murrow program. This year also, I had another photo exhibition in New York with the UN. And my exhibition, the one that I was talking about for the water trucks, it has made it to New York, and it's still going to go around the world to show the challenges of water in the country. So last year, I got into trouble with the government. This is because, sorry, let me face. I don't know which direction to face.
Wherever you're comfortable.
Because I'm used to talking to the audience.
There's no
I'm not
rule.
sure which direction to face, yeah. Last year, I got some messages on my WhatsApp. Someone messaged me and they told me that they needed me to go and cover a story. I'm a freelance journalist, so when I saw that message, I was like, this looks like a good story to cover. But it was on a Sunday. So usually on Sunday, I don't work. And I was just feeling lazy on that day. But then I said, I'll just go and cover it and then go and continue enjoying my day because it's Sunday. So one of the people who reached out to me was a protester. They were 8 in total. They went and protested in a place called Konyo Konyo in Juba, South Sudan. And when they protested, it was a peaceful protest. And one of them was shot on the leg. And then one of them was released on that day, but others were still in prison. So the protesters who reached out to me, they reached out to me because they wanted to talk about why they went to protest in the first place. Mm-hmm. So they told me that they protest because the goods in the market were too expensive. They couldn't afford transport. They couldn't afford basic things like food, water, just basic things that can keep a human being to survive. And so they decided to go and make a peaceful protest. So they just wanted media attention, and that's why they reached out to me. But the protest had taken place in the morning, and I went to interview them in the evening. So where they interviewed me was an open place. I had a little bit of reservation about it. I had a little bit of reservation because it's an open place. And you know, in my country, South Sudan, sometimes you're not allowed to just show your camera and recorder anyhow. You have to have permission from the media authority. And we can only have it out in a conference or a closed function like this one. So I just thought it's going to be just like 10 minutes or so. It's straightforward, so there's nothing wrong with doing the interview. And these are young people, and I usually cover stories about young people, women, health stories, you know, like minorities, stories of people who are not usually put on news. So I thought that was, and also I was curious, you know, why did these young people go to the streets, you know? Because I thought that was so brave, because how can you just go on the streets and you know how strict it is to go and protest? You have to go and ask for permission. After you get the permission, then you go and protest. And usually it's hard to get such sources. To get a source like that one to come to you, that was, I thought that was very easy, you know, because I didn't have to struggle for that source. They just came to me, so I said, okay, let me do this story. Then I went, I interviewed them, and then it was straightforward. Once I was done with the interview, we all decided to part ways. Everyone went to whichever place they're going to. And then when I was crossing the road, 4 people who are policemen, I assume, or national security, in civilian clothing, they took me by force and shoved me into a vehicle. I kicked and screamed. Nobody helped me, and it was an open market. So a lot of people were watching me, and that was very difficult for me because I'm screaming, I'm pushing, I'm kicking, but then one of them threatened me. And when they threatened me, I said, okay, let me just compile and get into the vehicle. So I was sandwiched between them. They took my phone and recorder immediately, and then the vehicle was just moving. I didn't know where it was going. We ended up at I think it was a national security headquarters, I'm not sure, or a police station, I'm not sure. And then from there, they took my phone immediately, asked for my password. When I didn't give my password, one of them became physical. He hit me with a broom. So, I was slapped. Yeah. So then when I saw like that person was starting to become violent, I just gave him the password immediately. I don't think he found the information he was looking for, and then we went to another location. The first location was Buluk Police. Sorry, it was Juba Police Station. I think it was in Juba town. Then we went to the second location, which was in Buluk Police. And from there, I found that the 2 protesters that I interviewed had been, they were on the floor being interrogated. So I felt very guilty because I thought I shouldn't have done the story in the first place because I wouldn't want my sources to be in danger. And I found them, they were there on the floor. And then they were being interrogated. They were asked, why did you reach out to this lady? Why this media house only? Why didn't you go to different media houses? And then they responded. And then at some point they took my phone. I mean, they came back with the phone again. And then when they came back with it, they asked for the password again. And then I think I met up with one of the top officials there. And when I was with them, they went through my WhatsApp. So I'm going to try to summarize it as much as possible. So when I was with them, they went through my WhatsApp, collected all the information, especially for the protests, because they sent me pictures to show how they protested, messages, so they forwarded it to themselves. And then also my recorder, they listened to the interview. It was played when I was standing right there. And then they asked me, why am I doing interrogation? Like, am I like a policeman or something, you know? So they made me feel like what I'm doing is wrong, to be a journalist. And then I think they deleted, first they took it, they removed it from the recorder, but I think they deleted my work. And I felt really bad because I had interviews that I had done previously that I didn't put on air. I had like a couple of interviews that I did, feature stories, which I was like planning to do within the week. So everything was deleted. And then afterwards, they never returned back my recorder or my phone. So on that day, I thought because they have that information, they will release me, but they did not release me. I ended up spending the night in the Buluk, which was the interrogation place that I went to. And then afterwards, what happened is that the next day they came with a police vehicle. We were put in there, and you can imagine I was wearing a dress, so going in a police vehicle in a dress, it was a Monday the next day. Then we were taken to a police cell in Melekia. And in the police cell, I was now there with other female prisoners there as well. And on that day, again, I thought I was going to be released, but I wasn't released. They said that the investigator was not there to come and take my statement. And then that's the day when everyone found out about my arrest. My family members, they came, they found me there. It was not a good, it wasn't good for my family to see me in that situation, And then UJOS was there. They connected me with UJOS is the journalist of South Sudan. Sorry, I don't, Union of Journalists of South Sudan. Yeah, so they looked for a lawyer, and the National Press Club also for South Sudan looked for a lawyer. And then I was told that 8 lawyers came, but they were threatened, and then only 4 remained. So the first day, I didn't get out. The second day, I got at least they took my statement on the second day, the policeman. And what they said is that I was in the protest, which is not true. I was not in the protest. They even told all the media houses that I was one of the people who was leading the protest, that I was in the protest, which is really not true. I was not in the protest. I just interviewed the people who took part in the protest. And then they asked me, where is your ID? Then I said, I didn't carry my ID because it wasn't my working day on that day. And that's why I didn't carry my ID. Then they said, how will we know that you're a journalist? Then the good thing is that my colleagues, they went and printed out my ID to prove that I'm a journalist at VOA. And then I think the third day, I was supposed to go to court. The vehicles for going to court, we were taken to the court, but then, and now I'm officially treated like a prisoner. Because at first, I kept on calling it a detention. I'm telling the police, how long am I going to be detained for? They say, this is not a detention, this is an arrest. So I was like, okay, okay, it's an arrest. Because I used to, when I was working with the National Press Club, we used to do trainings on safety for journalists. So I already had an idea of how these things usually go. But I thought it's just gonna, most of the time people are usually detained for like maybe 2 hours or 3 hours, with questions back and forth, and then afterwards they're released. So I thought that would be the same situation for me, but that wasn't the situation. The interrogation kept on continuing, they kept on holding me. So the third day, when we were supposed to go to court, the car turned and it went to the women's prison. So I didn't even know that I was going to the women's prison. And the car reached there, it was raining on that day. They did some testings in the body to see whether I have HIV or COVID-19 or something. And then I ended up going to the prison immediately. It was just like, okay, go ahead. And I was also with the other protesters. They were also with me on that day. But, I went to the female cells, and prison, and they went to the male prison. And yeah, and also I remember during the interrogations, when I said that I work for Voice of America, South Sudan in Focus, it's like they were getting really angry, and they asked me whether I'm a spy, and I said, no, I'm not a spy. So that was one of the big challenges. And then I'm just gonna fast forward. So within the week, the lawyers came, and they did a lot of negotiation, and then there was a lot of campaigns online. My colleagues really helped me out. My colleagues, they did campaigns every single day. My family also helped me out. Union of Journalists helped me out. The Media Authority, they had a press release. Voice of America, South Sudan in Focus, they helped me out with a press release confirming that I'm a journalist who works for them. The American Embassy also, they wrote a press release for me to be released. So it just blew up. It was everywhere. My story was everywhere. And I didn't feel good about it because I'm a journalist, I'm not supposed to be in front of the story, I'm supposed to be behind.
Right, not in the news, but yeah.
Now I was the one who was there, and I just didn't like that because it has somehow affected my work, because now I'm currently not working. My job is on pause. I'm going through an asylum, which I don't know how long it will take for it to be approved. Also, it's like after the arrest, there has been like some mistrust with sources, because they feel like either they'll be in trouble or I'll get into trouble again and be arrested. So people are very reserved right now. Also, as a female journalist who used to advocate for more women to get into the field of journalism, I think now it's gonna be, like it became, I felt a bit embarrassed, because I was like, how can I advocate for women to join, and I was arrested, So I still hope that women will still continue to join the field of journalism, and I also hope that the government or just people in society in South Sudan understand the role of journalists, that we are not there to be like spies, or we're not taking information for it to be used to destroy the country. The information is to develop the country. We just came from war. We are trying to rebuild the country. We are trying to move forward, We are looking for problems, and we're also looking for solutions. And I think as a young person, I don't want the next generation to go through what my parents went through, or even for our generation to go through that again. We've lost many people, and people are suffering still until today, and they shouldn't continue to suffer like that if we can find solutions to the problems. So basically, as journalists, we create awareness, and we show the government, here are the problems, and then especially like with the Voice of America, I think it's one of the media houses that tries to be we're not biased, and we look at all sides, and we show the side of the government, the side of the experts, and we also talk to the people on the ground as well. So our stories are usually credible, and it's fact-checked. We don't spread any propaganda or anything. We just want to develop our country and find solutions. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All I can say is how much admiration I have for all four of you, for standing true to your journalistic ethics and your determination to tell stories despite all the pressures against you, which is incredibly strong. And what you do or continue to do is so important, not only to the people in your country, but to all of us here as well, who want to know what's actually happening. And, I'd like to open up to questions if anybody has any. Oh, thank you. Okay. How many journalists are still in jail in Ethiopia, and what are the challenges faced by journalists in Ethiopia amid the peace process?
Oh, okay. The RSF report, my colleague here just mentioned earlier, states that Ethiopia is actually again descending in press freedom. And just last week, the government made a new arrest of over 20 journalists and even some professors, especially focused on Amhara region in the Amhara ethnic group.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I don't have the exact number, I think we have about more than 50 journalists now from various media in prison. And I know that over 20 journalists about 2 weeks ago were released who were also imprisoned. I think CPJ would have the perfect up-to-date data. The peace process is going to, let's say that many Ethiopians are happy, at least that we're not in active combat stage like we were a couple of years ago. So at least, the ceasefire and the kind of agreement between the Prosperity Party and TPLF is going to have some spite from the conflict. But this is the re-emergence of the EPRDF in a different form. Mm-hmm. The party that expelled many of us and imprisoned many of us. And I think international organizations, the international community will be much more focused on the peace, that they would ignore some of the human rights abuse and abuse against journalists that would come after the peace process. We all have our issues when we open the detail of the peace process, but that's not the topic in the question.
Yeah.
But I don't see a lot of hope for freedom of press or freedom of expression or safety of journalists from the peace process, because journalists or the media is not part of the deal or the topic. Mm-hmm. And the international community that is enforcing the peace is much more focused on disarmament, ceasefire, delivering food aid for the hungry, delivering aid for the displaced millions, women and children. And this would make the safety of journalists, press freedom, and independence media, I think, at the back foot. I think that would be the direct impact and the immediate impact.
Interesting. How can we emphasize press freedom there, make that a higher priority?
I think organizations like National Press Club and CPJ should focus and make more pressure on the international community, because that would be the accessible organizations or institutions to make press freedom part of the peace deal. We know that the Ethiopian government is short of foreign currency. We know that organizations like TPLF and also OLF are very desperate to be in good favor of United Nations, United States of America, IMF, and we should, NPC and CPJ could direct their attention towards them so that they can enforce or at least make issue of press freedom part of the discussion.
Right.
I think this could be one part where the international community or part of the international community can work. That's my take.
That's interesting. Do you have thoughts about Iran as far as what's
Ye-
going on there now? And
Yes, we had a very hard year in Iran. As you know, the protest in Iran was the two sides that was very good in the view of us to see how people are trying to be free in the country, and that also had a very bad side, and that was many of journalists as other people was arrested by the government. More than 100 journalists arrested by the government in just 3 or 4 months, and some of them still are in jail, and the situation is not good in our country for years. And it's so sad for us because it's near to 120 years we have newspapers in Iran. And after a long history of trying to do something in this field, we still have some problem with the basic rights of journalism in Iran. And an interesting point I want to say is, if you're looking to the history, about different places, you can see same method using by the government.
yep.
They even practice this single act in every arrest, no matter in Asia, in Africa, in everywhere. But we have know that in the other side. We have to do same. We have to find our colleagues in the different places. We have to find a solution to work together to find solutions for same problems, because they are doing same. And I think it's so important to find that for unity of people to express freedom around the world, not in just some places.
Right. 100% agree.
Yeah.
Yes. Zaki, how about Afghanistan? How would you say the current situation is?
I think I talked about Afghanistan enough. There's a lot of dark stories, especially for the journalists in media who are working inside Afghanistan. But there are a lot of hopes that with the citizen participation in working with the media and independent journalists and also exiled media, what we see is a kind of long fight between stopping independent media from Taliban side and resistance from our side. I see that all Afghan journalists who are exiled outside Afghanistan know that the restriction is increasing. The number of prisoners, detained, new laws against civil society, against human rights, against women's rights, against media, day by day this is increasing, because in all of Iran and also Afghanistan, you face like one official from the Taliban have two faces. One, he is, for example, Minister of Culture or Minister of Interior. The other face is a religious person that took his power from the God, and he believed that he is a kind of hand of the God in the land. So if you won't by the law to fight with official, he's a government guy, then they have every time they have a power to do anything with the independent media and journalists as a president that have been appointed by God in the land. So then in Afghanistan, I think the Taliban is against education. While they are trying to ban everyone from school, banning women from working to international community, this is the road of their legitimation in Afghanistan. They can train a lot of their fighters. They can bring attention from literature society. So while media is spreading information among the society, raising awareness, so you see after school, after university, they will, the next enemy is the media. So they will continue their fight. So there's no hope from that side, because unfortunately, the international community, what they demand from Taliban was only one single thing. All United States Department was busy that Taliban should let the girls to go to school beyond 6th grade. All the civil rights, human rights of citizens of Afghanistan have been forgotten, include freedom of expression. So while the international community is demanding this one single right, then the Taliban know how to play with this. After a year, they banned all the girls from going to school. They banned from going to university. They banned from working with the international community. The next move, I think, is against the media, because this is something that they know that is rising awareness against the Taliban, against their belief. But the fortunate thing is the exiled media and also the participant of citizens. I just mentioned 2 years before, we just announced the position of hiring 11 to 15 people for Etilaatroz. In a week, we received 721 resume for that.
Wow.
And many of them was very good and qualified. There was from different provinces, include Kandahar and Helmand in Uruzgan, that are the very, very strategic geography for Taliban. These are, I think, something that you are hopeful about Afghanistan freedom of expression in the future. But it is a fight that I think will continue between the journalists, media, and also the Taliban.
Yeah. I think that is a hopeful sign that so many are interested. They know how important journalism is and to press freedom to their country, that they're applying for
Yes.
the job, despite all the pressures against it. So that's good. How about South Sudan? How would you describe the situation overall?
Freedom of expression is still a huge challenge in South Sudan. I think people do not understand the role of journalists or the role of the media. You know, even sources sometimes they don't want to talk to the journalists. Security officials, national security, the police, sometimes they don't understand the role of the media. I think because there has been a negative perception of what we do as journalists. I think there has to be more awareness, more campaigns to show the positivity of media, because if you don't have journalists, you will not know what is happening in the country. And you're not going to be informed, educated, or entertained. So you can imagine if one day you switch on the TV and there's nothing. So that's how powerful journalists are. So I believe that there still should be dialogue between journalists and national security or the police or government officials as well. And then, yeah, that's what I think should be done.
Yes, I totally agree. If people aren't informed of what's happening, then they can't make decisions that are best for them or their country. So, did anybody have any other questions? No? Okay. I know we went over a little bit, but I really am so grateful for all your stories and telling us what you experienced, and and I hope we continue our talk about how the National Press Club and the Journalism Institute can help further your stories and help address the problems that we're all facing here with press freedom. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.